What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and today I'm back to talk about Warhammer 40K. So what this video is a compilation of videos that I've done on grimdark battles featuring Primarch versus Primarch. I like to do these compilations, and I've done two more in the past. I believe it was Traitors versus Loyalist and Imperium versus Xenos. So basically what this is I scour the best fighters that the universe of Warhammer 40K has to offer, and I put them against one another. I take the lore, the poll results, and the stat lines of the current edition to figure out who would come out on top in this grimdark battle, and then I create a little mock, versus battle between the two. Basically think of it as a low-budget death battle. So hopefully you guys enjoy the ones that I've got covered here, and I've got a slew more in a playlist which you guys can check out. So if you guys want to see Dante go up against Abaddon the Despoiler, or maybe you want to see Eldrad against Ahriman in a battle of the strongest Psyker, go ahead and check out that playlist, because I'm sure you'll find a battle that you want to see. And with that being said, this has been the Sound Alchemist. Enjoy. A whirlwind of toxic miasma engulfs a moon in a distant corner of the galaxy. The flora and fauna rot away as a sinister laugh cackles across the valleys of death. The noxious clouds part as a massive orb of multicolored flame plummets towards Mortarion. The Pale King surrounds himself with Nurgle's rotflies as the warp flame takes the shape of the Crimson King, Magnus the Red. The two demon Primarchs brandish their weapons, and the Chaos Gods themselves are in awe. Which one of their pawns would emerge victorious? That is the question that we will answer in today's episode of Grim Dark Battles. What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and today I'm back to bring you guys another episode of Grim Dark Battles, the Versus series where we pit two champions of the Warhammer 40K universe against each other in a who would win scenario. This scenario, we take everything into consideration, your guys' vote, the lore, and the tabletop. So, with that being said, let's go into the weapons, war gear, feats, and abilities of these two demon Primarchs, Mortarion and Magnus the Red, and let's find out which one of these two heretics will be the better. Raised on Prospero, Magnus was mentored by the Psyker scholar Amon. He then mastered every psychic training and any program given to him, and he quickly became the strongest person in that world. He then purged the Psych New and Warp entities and became the hero of Prospero. Magnus was always special from the beginning, even amongst his other Primarch brothers, for he had remembered everything since his creation, and he even conversed with the Emperor psychically. So when the Emperor came to Prospero for his son, the two embraced and conversed like they were old friends. Unfortunately, the Space Marines created under Magnus's gene seed had multiple psychic mutations, and he spent 60 years trying to cure the flesh change. He even lost his right eye in a bargain with a warp entity, which later turned out to be Zeech. Although the flesh change did stop, it only lasted for a small amount of time. During the Great Crusade, Magnus's use of warp powers caused a schism amongst the Primarchs, and the Council of Nicaea had to be held. Here, the Emperor decreed that all librarians were to cease the use of psychic powers, all except for the astropaths and navigators. However, Magnus still continued to practice and study the warp in secret. Magnus then foresaw the events of the Horus Heresy, and when his attempts to talk his brothers out of it failed, he attempted to psychically warn the Emperor. Unfortunately, a barrier was erected around the Imperial Palace, and Magnus had no choice but to accept power from chaos in order to break through. This led to demons pouring into the Emperor's throne room. The Emperor managed to slay them all, but in his anger he banished Magnus for his insolence, and he paid no heed to the warnings of his son. The Emperor then sent Leman Russ and his Space Wolves to arrest Magnus for his wrongdoings, but Horus then ordered Russ for the destruction of the 1,000 Suns and the execution of Magnus the Red. This led to the burning of Prospero and a great battle between the two Primarchs. But just as Russ was about to kill Magnus, a deal was struck with Zeech, and all of the 1,000 Suns were teleported away to safety. Magnus and his legion would live, but at what cost? Throughout the events of the heresy, Magnus helped Mortarion in controlling his innate psychic abilities. He even killed Malcador and went on to kill the Emperor, but Vulcan stopped him. During this fight, the Emperor showed Magnus what could have been: a future of prosperity, a future with no heresy. But Magnus had to sacrifice his legion for this future to become reality. Angered at this, Magnus fully gave himself over to chaos. After the heresy, the demon prince Magnus fought against the Space Wolves upon Fenris, heavily damaging their gene seed factories, and he also helped in creating a massive warp rift across the galaxy. Magnus then fought against Vahl and Guilliman upon Luna, and he was about to slay his loyalist brother until the Sisters of Silence arrived and weakened him to the point where Guilliman was able to stab Magnus through his heart, sending him reeling back into the warp. Now let's take a look at the lore and history of Mortarion. Mortarion was raised on the world of Barbarous, a mountainous planet with poison fog clouds. He was taken in by a sorceress warlord, and he was taught the ways of war. As he grew up, he raised an army of villagers and went on to battle against his adopted father. However, the poisonous fog was too much, and Mortarion was on the brink of succumbing to the poison. But a mysterious man saved him. This was none other than the Emperor. During the Great Crusade, Mortarion was weary of Magnus and Psykers in general. He was great friends with Horus, and many questioned his loyalties to the Emperor, but the Emperor said that loyalty to Horus would be the same as being loyal to him. When the heresy began, Mortarion's hatred for what the Emperor had become really fueled him. In his eyes, he was just like his adopted father on Barbarous, a tyrant drunk on power, a warp-tainted aberration, and this led to him hating Psykers even more. Mortarion and his Legion of Death Guard betrayed the Imperium at Isfahan III, as well as at the Drop Site Massacre. He fought against Jagtai Khan, but the battle ended in a draw. He also banished a demon with his innate psychic powers, and after fighting against Typhon and getting infected by the Destroyer Hive, he reluctantly had no choice but to pledge himself to Nurgle's servitude. After the battle on Terra and Horus's defeat, Nurgle elevated Mortarion to the rank of Demon Prince. His next feats were the slaying of the Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights, Garonetian, but then came one of his most humiliating defeats at the hands of Drago, who uttered Mortarion's true name, weakened him to the point where he was able to be pinned down, his chest cavity ripped open, and Garonetian's name carved into Mortarion's chest before being banished into the warp. However, in most recent of events, Mortarion has spread the God Blight, a disease capable of killing even a Primarch. Unfortunately, Nurgle and Mortarion never saw eye to eye, and because of this, he ignored Nurgle's commands, and he ended up fighting against Guilliman. Mortarion came out victorious during this bout, and he tried to bring his brother over to the side of chaos. However, Guilliman reawoke and he channeled the raw powers of the Emperor himself. Mortarion was losing against this newly empowered Guilliman, and because of this, he had no choice but to flee before him. And now that we know the lore and history behind these two combatants, let's go ahead and look at their point value, their stats, their weapons and war gear before we get into their battle. Alright, so let's look at Magnus the Red, his points, his stats, his abilities, weapons, and those psychic powers that he's going to be using. So first of all, Magnus the Red comes in at a whopping 24 power or 465 points. He has a bracketed stat line that he doesn't really lose much in my opinion. His movement is 16, weapon skill and ballistic skill 2 up, strength is 8, toughness is 7, starts off with 18 wounds, 7 attacks, 10 leadership, and a 3-up save. When he drops down to 9 wounds, he drops down to 6 attacks and 14-inch movement, and then when he's at 4 wounds, he's only got 5 attacks and a 12-inch movement. So not much is being lost here. He's still going to be a powerhouse even when he's on death's door. For his weapons, he just has one, and that is the Blade of Magnus, which is a strength times 2, minus 4 AP, 3 damage weapon. It has a special ability, but it's not really going to come into play on this matchup, because whenever he kills a character, which Mortarion is, that character becomes a freaking spawn. So if anything, it's just a slap to the face of Mortarion, but again, in this battle, it doesn't really do much. Still though, strength 16, minus 4 AP, 3 damage, can do a lot of work. Continuing on to his abilities, he's got the Crown of the Crimson King, which gives him a 4-up invuln save, and he gets to ignore Perils of the Warp Mortal Wounds on a 2-up. On top of this, he does have the Gaze of Magnus, which makes his smite much more deadlier. Smite now deals d6 mortal wounds, or if he rolled an 11 or higher, it deals 2d6 instead. So if he rolls really good, Mortarion could be facing up to 12 mortal wounds, and that's going to melt him away. He is the Primarch of the Thousand Suns, meaning he gets to reroll hit rolls of 1, and he's got that unearthly power. Basically, Magnus can add a bonus to his psychic test depending on how many wounds he's at. So if he's on his top bracket, he's adding a +2 to his psychic tests and his Deny the Witch rolls. If he's in his middle bracket, he's adding a +1, and anything less than that, his last bracket, he doesn't get any benefit. His Warlord trait is Lord of the Forbidden Lore, which basically means he knows 1 additional power. Now, since he is probably one of the strongest psychers in the galaxy, he can cast 3 psychic powers and he can deny 3 as well. For the powers that I chose for this battle, I went with Smite, because it's a given, and his Smite is really, really good. I also decided to go with Death Hex. Basically what this means is that you pick an enemy within 12 of Magnus, and until the start of my next psychic phase, they can't take invulnerable saves. This is big. Really, really big. Because if you can get this off right away, like I said, Mortarion will just fall. The amount of saves that he's going to be able to miss is going to be more than what he can make, so I'm really banking on Death Hex. Continuing on, I've got Diabolic Strength, which gives Magnus a 2 to his strength and a 1 extra attack. That would put his strength at 10, and if he's hitting with his Blade of Magnus, it is hitting hard at 20 strength. So that's really, really good. And that extra attack would put him at 8 attacks when he's on his top bracket. Continuing on, I've given him Zeech's Firestorm, which allows him to roll 9 d6s, and any die that comes up at a 6 is a mortal wound given. Not that great, I probably won't be using this one too much, but this next one, it is a must. Weaver of Fates. Until the start of my next psychic phase, my invuln save is improved by 1 to a 3-up. So, considering that he's only got a 4-up invuln, the 3-up is huge. Never underestimate how much a 3-up to a 4-up will save you when you need to roll those saves. So, 2-up save, Oh no, actually he's got a 3-up in Vahl and save if I get this off, and he's also got a 3-up armor save. So something to keep mind of. And with that being said, that is all the rules, weapons, and war gear that Magnus has at his disposal. He is the quote-unquote weaker of the two Primarchs, at least on paper. But the other thing to kind of keep note of is that they're getting their codex very, very soon for 9th edition, so we can expect Magnus the Red to become even more powerful. But for now, let's go ahead and take a look at his opponent, Mortarion. Mortarion has the luxury of having his brand new 9th edition codex already upgrade him to a monster. Mortarion comes in at 25 power or 490 points. This guy can literally be a third of your army if you're playing at 1500. So let's see if he's got that type of power backing him up. With his stat line, it is also bracketed. He starts off with 12 movement, 2+ for his weapon skill and ballistic skill, strength and toughness both 8, 18 wounds, 7 attacks, leadership 3, and a 3-up save. Once he drops down to his middle bracket, he'll only have 9 wounds. His attacks go down to a 6, and his movement goes down to a 10. So again, he's not losing much here. And at his last bracket, it starts off at 5 wounds remaining, with only 5 attacks and an 8-inch movement. So just like Magnus, he's here to bring the pain, but he's just a little bit tougher. He has a slew of abilities, like a ton. So let's start off with disgustingly resilient. Basically, any damage he takes, you're subtracting 1 from it. He's got the Barbaran Plate, which gives him a 4-up in Vahl save, and he's got the Contagions of Nurgle ability. This ability is called Nurgle's Gift, and basically what this does is if an enemy is within 9 inches due to his toxic presence of Mortarion, you're subtracting 1 from the enemy's toughness. Normally this would be pretty big, but when you're fighting toughness like 7, 8, that kind of thing, you really have to be hitting at a crazy amount of strength to actually make that difference from like a 2-up to a 3-up to a 4-up, but it's still something to keep note of. He's got Putrid Explosion, so if he does fall, he will blow up on a 4-up and deal D3 mortal wounds. He is the Lord of the Death Guard, which gives him the ability to reroll hit rolls, and like I said earlier, he's got the Host of Plagues. At the start of the first battle round, you select an additional Warlord trait to this guy. So this was the ability that I was a little iffy on. If you guys remember a few days ago, I asked on whether we should do Warlord traits for these two characters, because Mortarion gets the upper hand in having more Warlord traits, more abilities, a newer codex, so I didn't know if that would just tip the scales way too much in Mortarion's favor, but you guys decided to go ahead and go with it. So with that being said, the 2 Warlord traits that I chose were Gleaming Bloat and Shamble Rot. But I'll get to that in just a little bit, because we also have Rotting Resilient, meaning that this Warlord ignores wounds lost on a 6-up. So a 6-up feel no pain. Now what Gleaming Bloat does is that while you have this... So here's what Gleaming Bloat does. As long as they're within the contagion range of this ability, the enemy cannot fire Overwatch or set to defend, which won't really matter because we're not using command points. And this is the one that's really good. Each time a model in an enemy unit that makes an attack, the hit roll and the wound roll cannot be re-rolled. So if Magnus gets some of his psychic shenanigans out, he won't be able to re-roll the hit or the wound against this guy, so this could be big, really big. And the last contagion that he has is Shamble Rot. When an enemy unit, excluding vehicle units, are within the contagion's range, at the start of your opponent's movement phase, you roll a d6 and you subtract 1 if the enemy unit has the character keyword, which Magnus does. On a 4-up, the enemy suffers a mortal wound, and on a 6, that enemy suffers D3 mortal wounds. So, just a means of potentially bringing Magnus down just a little bit, just by being in base contact to him, really. Now, we all know that Mortarion hates Psykers, but he himself is one. So, this means that he can cast 2 powers and deny 3. So, This will be a matchup of Psyker against Psyker, and we'll see who can come out on top. Now for his psychic abilities, of course, you gotta go with Smite, it's a given. I also chose to go with the Gift of Contagion, and what that means is that you select an enemy unit within 18 inches of Mortarion, and until the start of your next psychic phase, you subtract 1 from the strength of the models in that unit. However, if you roll 8 or higher on your psychic test, you subtract 1 from the strength and the attacks. So this may cancel out Mortarion's means of getting more attacks and another strength boost. I also chose to go with the Miasma of Pestilence. What this does is until the next psychic phase, each time an attack is made against Mortarion, you subtract 1 from the attack roll. Another big one. And lastly, Putrescent Vitality. Basically at the start of my psychic phase, or until the start of my next psychic phase, I add 1 to my strength and toughness. So again, if we're able to get off these psychic powers, they could be game changing. Oh, and the thing about Smite with Mortarion is that it does D3 mortal wounds regularly instead of the 1, and if the psychic test is 10 or more, it's D6. So if it's a Smite battle, Magnus wins, but you know, at least it's doing mortal wounds. A ton of rules to keep mind of, a ton of dice to be rolled, and a ton of epic battles between demon Primarchs to be had. So I'm about to start my best of 2 fights, so place your bets. Who will come out on top? Magnus the Red or Mortarion? Let's go! Magnus wins the roll-off, and he begins first by moving right up to Mortarion's face. He now attempts to cast his Weaver of Fate's ability, which barely goes off, even with the help of his psychic test bonus. Mortarion then attempts to dispel it, but he narrowly misses the roll, and Magnus now has a 3-up invuln. Death Hex goes off with an 11 thanks to his psychic test bonus, but Mortarion rolls a double 6. His warp ability fails to manifest. This angers Magnus, and he now casts Smite with a warp charge test of an 8. Mortarion's deny roll is only a 5, and 4 bolts of warp lightning rip into Mortarion's putrid form, which he cannot save any of them, dealing 4 wounds and bringing him down to 14 wounds remaining. Magnus now makes his charge roll, and he begins his assault, dealing 6 wounds with his blade. 4 wounds slip through the invulnerable save of 4-up for Mortarion, and he then saves 1 more with Revoltingly Resilient, and finally his Disgustingly Resilient reduces the damage from 3 to 2, meaning that when all is said and done, Mortarion has taken 6 more wounds, leaving him with only 8 wounds remaining. Mortarion now begins his turn by attempting to strengthen himself with Putrescent Vitality, and it goes off with a 10. Magnus's Deny the Witch rolls is much too low, and Mortarion's strength and toughness have now risen to 9. Now it's his turn to cast Smite, but Magnus denies it, for it would seem that Magnus has the upper hand in a battle of psychic abilities. However, Mortarion then pulls out his lantern and starts blasting, dealing a single wound, but Magnus's empowered defenses hold true, and he takes no damage. Mortarion then attacks with Silence's Eviscerating Blow attack. Only 6 attacks are thrown, but they all hit, and they all wound. Magnus's 3-up invuln save only saves half of them. This is a devastating D3 plus 3 damage scythe, and it dealt an astronomical 14 wounds to the Crimson King, placing him on his final bracket with only 4 wounds remaining. However, the turn now goes back to Magnus, and he then casts Death Hex with no psychic test bonus, and he gets a 9. This is enough for it to go off. Mortarion needs to deny this, but his rolls aren't high enough. This is huge, for now Mortarion cannot take invulnerable saves. Magnus is out for blood, and he then successfully casts Tzeentch's Firestorm. However, Mortarion chooses not to deny this one, saving his deny for the next Warp Power. Magnus gets lucky, and when he rolls 9d6s, a whopping 5 land on a 6. 5 mortal wounds are dealt to Mortarion, but he only takes 3 due to his defensive abilities. 5 wounds left on the Demon Primarch of Nurgle. For his final psychic test, Magnus attempts to cast Smite, but Mortarion has denied it this time around. For Mortarion is not out of the fight just yet. This is Magnus's last chance, for if he cannot bring Mortarion down now, it looks like he may not survive the ensuing storm of attacks. Magnus rolls. 5 attacks hit. 5 land. 4 wounds done. With a -4 AP and no invuln save available, Mortarion has reduced the damage of each wound going from 3 to 2. But can he roll high enough on his revoltingly resilient rolls to outlast this melee? Unfortunately not. He fails them all. The Pale King has fallen, but not without a parting gift. A putrid explosion which has left the Cyclopean King with only a single wound remaining. But the battle is over. The victor of this grim dark battle is none other than Magnus the Red. So there you go, guys. The winner of this battle is none other than Magnus. In my opinion, this could have gone either way, because I did play this out 3 times, and basically what happened is whoever won the roll-off won the match. Magnus went twice, and he won both times that he went first. Mortarion went first once, and he won 1 time. It really is a matter of how the dice gods want to play this. But one thing that I did notice is that Mortarion has a ton of defensive abilities. He can really hit you hard if he gets you with like his psychic powers and whatnot. He can strengthen his defense by a lot. Like his toughness can go up to a 9. He takes -1 damage from each attack given to him. He's got a 4-up invuln save. He ignores wounds on a 5-up. Like the dude is crazy durable, and he can dish out attacks. Silence is devastating with that D3+3 damage, and when Mortarion did win, it's because of that type of attack. He won in a single round, whereas Magnus basically hung on by the skin of his teeth, and it took 2 rounds in both cases for him to come out on top. So it really depends on how lucky you are to see who wins, but in this case, the winner was Magnus the Red. And when you take a look at the lore, Magnus should come out on top because he is a stronger psyker than Mortarion is. Mortarion hates himself for being a psyker, and so he even had some like help by Mortarion or by Magnus through like in between like the heresy and whatnot, and that's with Magnus being at a fraction of his strength. Like during the lore of Magnus the Red, he was fractured, broken apart into different shards, and even now in the most current of events for Magnus the Red, he hasn't fully become himself. Like he is still fragmented. He is not at his 100% power, and one can argue that he is the strongest psyker in the entire 40k universe. So that just goes to show you just how strong Magnus the Red really is. And you guys agree with it, because in the voting poll that I had you guys do, a whopping 65% voted for Magnus to come out on top, while only 35% of you said that Mortarion could beat the Crimson King. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for watching this whole entire Grimdark battle. These things take me a long time to do, but I enjoy them. They're really, really fun, and I do like making up mock battles and actually playing these guys in the tabletop like 1v1. It really goes to show you that, you know, even if you're playing like a 500 point game or a 2,000 point game, the fun in these massive battles are seeing like characters go head to head. The chapter master going up against a Tau commander, or in this case 2 demon Primarchs going at it, like that's pretty badass. But I digress. Let me know your thoughts down below. Let me know what other characters you want to see in these grimdark battles. And if you like what we do here, you could always support us by hitting that subscribe button, liking, hitting the notification bell, and of course checking out our Patreon page.
What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, and I'd like to welcome you back to another epic grimdark battles. If you guys aren't aware of this, basically what I do is I pick 2 combatants in the Warhammer 40K universe and pit them against one another in a who would win matchup, taking in lore, your votes, and even the tabletop into consideration. So in this matchup, we have none other than the newest High Lord of Terra, the Abbess of the Sisters of Battle, Vahl. And her opponent is probably the strongest combatant in the Imperium, the Ultramarines Primarch, Vahl and Guilliman. This matchup is going to be quite the interesting one, but I do have to give out this little disclaimer that she's going up against a Primarch, so her chances of coming out on top are slim to none, because at the end of the day, a freaking Primarch is going to wipe the floor with any other non-Primarch combatant. But Vahl's saving grace is how good she is on the tabletop. The thing is, can Guilliman keep up with this overpowered model? We'll have to wait and see. But again, like I said, this is all being taken into account, the lore, your vote, and the tabletop. So who knows? Maybe Vahl, the underdog, will come out on top. You guys have to keep on watching to find out. But anyway, let's continue on with this grimdark battle. In this battle of Supreme Commanders, we have Vahl, who had recently been promoted to the rank of Abbess Sanctorum, all thanks to the Ecclesiarch's vote. The Ecclesiarchy were hoping of using her as a pawn to push their agendas and overall solidify their control on the Imperium, but they soon found out that she was quite formidable, both on and off the battlefield, all thanks to her faith and zealous attitude. She's often seen fighting in the front lines, wearing her Purgator Mirabilis Paragon warsuit, a warsuit that grants her an insane amount of durability and survivability. Basically what this means that on the tabletop she has a 4-up invuln save, and every time that she would lose a wound, she has a 4-up feel no pain. On top of this, she also has the Holy Aegis, a power very, very great, granted to her by none other than the Emperor himself. For each time an attack is allocated to this model, you have the damage characteristic rounding up. Her main means of ranged combat is her Paragon Missile Launcher, which has 2 types, the Sanctorum Missile and the Prioris Missile. They are both range 36, while the Sanctorum Missile is a heavy 2d6, strength 4, no AP, dealing 1 damage, while the Prioris is a heavy 2, strength 8, minus 2 AP, and dealing that big d6 damage. She also has her Fidelis, which is a 36 range, heavy 3, strength 6, minus 1 AP, 2 damage bolter. Now if you think she's the most devastating at range, you might be in for a surprise, because she has the relic, the Lance of Illumination. This relic has 2 types of attacks, a sweeping blow that basically doubles the amount of attacks you can do. Normally she can dish out 5 attacks, but with this sweeping blow, she's dealing out 10. Of course, it's a ranged weapon, so the type and range is melee. Strength is that of the user, AP -2 and 1 damage. So at strength 5, minus 2 AP, 1 damage, this can take out a horde of Griblies, but against her opponent, she might want to use her second type of blow, and that is the lunging strike. For this is a strength plus 3, AP minus 3, dealing 3 damage. And the cherry on top is that each unmodified wound roll of 6, the enemy target suffers an additional mortal wound. So potentially, if you roll all 6 with this, that 3 damage will be going to 4. And since we've kind of overlooked her stats, let's take a look at it again. Her movement is 8 inches, weapon skill and ballistic skill is a 2-up, strength 5, toughness 5, 8 wounds, 5 attacks, 9 leadership, and a 2-up save. Again, she does have that 4-up invuln save, she ignores mortal wounds on a 4, she halves damage whenever she takes it, and the crazy thing that we must not forget about Morven Vahl is that once per game, if her enemy has not fallen to her, she can attack again. So this could be big. Attacking again may be the key to taking out the Primarch Guilliman, but will it be enough? Place your bets and let's find out. But before that, we do have to cover Guilliman's feats, war gear, and stat line. So let's take a look at this Ultramarine Primarch. On the tabletop, Guilliman is 19 power or a whopping 380 points. He's got an 8-inch movement, weapon skill and ballistic skill of 2-up, strength and toughness of 6, 9 wounds, 6 attack, leadership 10, and he's got that 2-up save with a 3-up invuln. When it comes to his special rules, he's got that Armor of Fate, for if he dies, you roll a d6, and he potentially can come back on a roll of 4-up with d6 wounds remaining. So again, if it seems like Morven Vahl is getting the upper hand, fear not, for he might be able to come back for another round of combat. He is the Master of Battle in the 13th Primarch, which gives him an aura to reroll hit rolls of 1 and wounds of 1. So that could be big in him landing all his attacks, landing all his wounds. So it'd be up to Morven Vahl to see if her half damage and her invulns can save her. For his weapons, you have the Hand of Dominion, which is a dual type weapon. You can hit in melee with a strength times 2, AP minus 3, 4 damage, and that means the strength is 12. Or you could shoot at range for a 24-inch range, rapid fire 3, strength 6, minus 1 AP, 2 damage. But of course, we can't forget that he is wielding the Sword of the Emperor, which is a strength plus 2, minus 4 A3, 3 damage. But the wound roll of a 6-up deals D3 mortal wounds on top of the normal damage. So this weapon might be the one to overwhelm Morven Vahl. Because we can't forget about Guilliman's feats. He fought against a slew of opponents during the Great Crusade. He has been pretty much the Emperor's right-hand man when it comes to tactics and just being a model Primarch and having a very disciplined yet tactical force of Ultramarines. His tactics may be second to none. He led the Second Imperium. This man has been fighting for his whole life. He fought against Angron. He almost fell to the poison blade of Fulgrim. However, he was put in stasis, and with the help of the Eldar and Yvraine, he is back fighting for the Imperium. And just after that, just after his revival, he ended up going toe-to-toe with Magnus the Red, who one might say might be the strongest Psyker in all of the galaxy, especially since he has been given apotheosis and is a demon prince of chaos. So again, Guilliman has gone toe-to-toe with the best of them. He's been alive for thousands of years. Basically everything Morven Vahl has done, Guilliman has done 100 times over. So let's take a look at how these two dish out on the tabletop before we get into the mock battle. So let's dive right in.
Are you certain this is what you desire, High Abbess?
Yes. I must get stronger. So don't hold back.
Very well. Make the first move. Vahl unleashes a barrage of Sanctorum missiles at the Primarch as the battleground gets shrouded in dust and debris. She circles to her left, inching closer to him. All the while, a hail of bolter rounds roars out of her Fidelis bolter. She doesn't hear the impact against his armor, and before she can react, a crushing blow from Guilliman's power fist sends her flying. She quickly fires out more shots, but once again, she misses. The Hand of Dominion fires but a single shot, and she quickly shoots at that location. Once again, Guilliman's gauntlet lands a crushing blow. Anticipate your enemy's movements, Guilliman tells her. Switching tactics, Vahl takes out her Illumination Lance and begins to utter a prayer to the Emperor.
We serve the Emperor with our faith and devotion, and with faith, there must also sometimes come sacrifice.
The dust finally settles around the two combatants. Vahl charges forwards and sends a barrage of attacks with her lance, but Guilliman effortlessly dodges them. She pushes her warsuit to its limit, each blow speeding up and getting closer and closer to its mark, until the Hand of Dominion catches her spear. Vahl then quickly reacts and unleashes her Prioris missiles point blank. The explosion sends dust and debris all around them once again. A shiver runs down her spine as a blaze of warp flame cuts through the dust, the burning blade stopping mere inches away from her face. That's all for today, Guilliman says. Vahl lets out a sigh of relief as she thinks to herself.
Damn. I've still got a long way to go.
The winner of this grim-dark battle is Guilliman. So there's no surprise here that the Primarch of the Ultramarines comes out on top. Lore-wise, this guy's got plot armor so thick that nothing can take him down. He is currently the only loyalist Primarch around, and he's just leagues above Morven Vahl. Yes, she's strong, yes, she's tactical, her suit gives her a huge bonus, but when you're looking at experience and overall power, almost nobody can compare to Guilliman. And of course, you guys thought the exact same thing. For Guilliman won the poll that I sent for you guys. 85% of the vote went for Guilliman, while 15% went to Morven Vahl. It was one-sided, which I knew it was going to be, but I didn't think that many people would have voted for Vahl, seeing as how she's such a new character. You guys actually gave her a little bit more oomph than I thought you would. Now, when it comes to the tabletop, this is where things get spicy. For this portion of the Grimdark battle, it is a 1v1, 2 characters on a 12 by 12 plain square, I guess you could say. There's no terrain, no command points, no warlord traits. It's pretty much the characters' special rules and war gear going up against one another. Now, of course, Guilliman seems to be the better combatant if you're looking at just points/power level, but we shouldn't rule out Vahl at all. She comes in at about 265 if I'm correct, and she got some pretty awesome abilities that allow her to deal damage, ignore mortal wounds, she can attack twice, she takes half damage, so we'll see how this goes. So place your bets, and let's get into this portion of the Grimdark battles. The first round begins with Vahl winning the roll-off, and she goes first. She fires off her Fidelis, but Roboot brushes it off, no damage taken. Yet. She then shoots her Prioris missiles, 2 hits, 2 wounds, and 1 goes through. She rolls that d6 damage and it lands on a 4. She then rolls to charge and just barely makes it into combat. That would have been huge, because if Guilliman was able to get that first attack, that might have been it. Anyway, Vahl then hits with her Illuminarium Lance, and she decides to go with the lunging strike. Lucky for her, they all wound. Now Guilliman may go down if he can't save them, and to make matters worse, one of them is a 6, and that means that he suffers an additional mortal wound. A horrible roll leaves the Primarch with only a single wound remaining, but now it's his turn to hit back. Guilliman decides to use all of his attacks with the Hand of Dominion, favoring the double strength and straight fort damage, then trying to deal mortal wounds by rolling 6s with the Sword of the Emperor. Let's see if that was a good choice. So when he rolls to hit, they all hit. When he rolls to wound, they all wound. Now Vahl has to make her invulnerable save here. And she's only got a 4 up, and she rolls, and she can only save 2, meaning that 4 go through, and if you know math, 4 times 4 is 16 damage. However, we have to remember that she takes half damage, so she takes 8. But unfortunately, 8 is exactly what's needed to bring her down. Now she does fall, however, she has a special rule that she may blow up on a roll of 6 and it deals 1 mortal wound to Guilliman. Guilliman only has 1 wound remaining, so can she bring Guilliman down with her? No, unfortunately not. The roll is a 4, and with that, round 1 goes to Roboot Guilliman by the skin of his teeth. Round 2 starts, and Vahl once again wins the roll-off. She decides to go first and unloads her Sanctorum missiles. This one favors quantity over quality, 8 shots fired, but only 1 wounds, and Guilliman managed to save it. Now the Fidelis is fired, 2 wounds go through, which Guilliman also saves as well. This time, Vahl makes her charge with no problem, and close combat begins. Seeing as how the Sanctorum missiles did practically nothing, she once again decides to go for the lunging strike. Dealing more damage is better than more weaker attacks. So 5 hit, but only 3 wound, and no 6s this round. Guilliman's 3-up invuln save comes in clutch and no damage is taken. He has saved tons of shots this round. Now it's the Primarch's turn to fight, and this time he decides to bust out the Emperor's sword. 6 hits, 3 wounds, but the cherry on top is, even though he missed a bunch of ones, half of them went through, but all of them were 6s, and with the Emperor's sword, 6s deal an additional D3 mortal wounds. Now he rolls and he gets a total of 8 mortal wounds additional. Now Vahl does have a special rule that allows her to ignore mortal wounds on a 4-up, which she rolls and she ignores too. She now has to make her invuln saves for the regular damage from this attack, and again, it's a 4-up, so it's a 50-50 chance. She rolls, and unfortunately she rolls all 3, so all of the damage goes through, and it's just too much even when she's taken half damage, and Vahl falls to Guilliman. This time it doesn't even matter if she blows up. And we have our winner. 2 out of 3 times, back to back. Your winner is the Primarch of the Ultramarines, Roboot Guilliman. So this match I thought was going to be a lot closer. It didn't matter really that she had the ability to take half damage. Guilliman was just doing too much damage too quickly, and she couldn't really protect herself that well. Guilliman is just a beast, whether he's hitting at double strength for 4 damage with the fist, or he got really lucky, rolling 3 6s with the sword, and he almost got a perfect amount of mortal wounds. I think he rolled like a 5, a 5, and a 4, so he got 8 mortal wounds off. And the thing I feel that really brings Morven Vahl more to a more realistic level is that her invuln saves and her ignore wounds, her feel no pain essentially, it's only a 4-up. So she is ignoring mortal wounds on a 4-up, and she's saving most of her wounds half the time. But against a Primarch, this is just too much. Maybe if she survived the first round of combat and her other half of attacks would go, or I guess not other half, but her second volley of attacks, and she is able to fight twice, then Guilliman would have for sure lost that round in the beginning. However, just because you kill Guilliman once doesn't mean it's over. He can resurrect in a 4-up. It's only 50-50, but again, you never know. He could come back, and then by that point, Vahl will just fall again to him. It is a game of dice, it's a game of chance, but at least in these 2 bouts, Guilliman came out on top. And with winning the popular vote, with winning in the lore, and winning on the tabletop, the unanimous winner of this Grimdark Battles is Guilliman. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know all your comments down below. Let me know if you think Morven Vahl is actually worth it on the tabletop. Maybe Guilliman was just a bad matchup for her. And let me know what other characters you want to see in Grimdark Battles. I do have a playlist for this. There are tons of battles in there. Gaskell against Farsight, Dante against Abaddon the Despoiler, Drago against Trajan Valorous. So check it out. There's a ton of awesome fights in there. And thank you guys for watching. If you guys made it all the way to the end, let me know in the comments too, because I know this is a longer one and most people probably won't make it. But if you did, congrats. As always, this is the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.